Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner. Welcome to tonight's edition of The Robust Opposition. My guest tonight is Joel Block, and Joel is a retired labor attorney and freelance writer living in Orange County. He was the Democratic Party endorsed candidate for the 72nd Assembly District in the 2014 election. He participated in the recent California Democratic Party convention and has written about the many deficiencies in the conducts of the party officers' election. In fact, his article in the Voice of the OC is called Coup in the California Democratic Party, ? Welcome to the show, Joel.
Thank you, Lauren. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great having you. So I first encountered you on Sunday when I was live streaming the last session of the California State Democratic Party convention. And this was a lot of pandemonium ensued because Kimberly Ellis, who had thought she was winning the chair's race the night before, all of a sudden was not winning and in fact had lost, I'm putting in quotation marks, by 62 votes. And she did not concede the race. She did not come to the session on Sunday. And she basically worked in private with Eric Bauman's campaign and John Burton, the outgoing chair, to try to negotiate what we now are calling an audit of the ballots. And your article was all about, and so I videotaped you at one of the mics trying to make a point of order and a motion. Why don't you tell us what you felt going into that Sunday morning and then get into the irregularities? Because first I should say to the viewers that you were a proxy for an ADEM delegate. You were not a delegate yourself, and you were voted for Kimberly Ellis because that was the written instructions that you had. You were not a Kimberly Ellis partisan. And my viewers do know that I am a Kimberly Ellis partisan. So I am acting as an advocacy journalist this time. You know, this show is a little less objective than my usual shows, where I don't really have a side. Well, that's not true. I have a side in everything I do, and it's usually the anti-neoliberal side. So when I was talking about the no Olympics thing the other day, I tended to side with my guest who thinks that having the Olympics in Los Angeles would be a bad idea. So anyway, I did not want to have necessarily a Kimberly Ellis partisan on the show. And what I appreciated about your article was you were just talking about the process and your feeling that the party did not follow its own rules. So maybe you can speak to that.
Well, thanks. As you said, I was a proxy delegate at the convention and bound by written instructions to vote for Kimberly Ellis. I did not campaign for either Eric or Kimberly at the convention. The problem that developed Sunday morning was that we had heard the night before that it was a close election. Usually there is a report of any election that is conducted at a convention, and the report would give the vote totals to the delegates, who won, who lost, what the total votes that were counted. No such report happened. There were standing committee reports, the Rules Committee, the Credentials Committee that were scheduled. Those were delayed for a while. But even when those reports were made, there were no reports of the election totals. So those of us on the floor, at least myself and another attorney at mic number 1, repeatedly kept seeking recognition from Chair Burton for the purpose of making a point of order, requesting that a formal report of the election totals be given to the delegates and thereafter be acted upon, either to accept the report, reject the report, or provide some other means by which to resolve the close election and any challenges or irregularities to that election. We were ruled out of order numerous times. Others on the floor sought recognition for the purpose of moving to have a recount of the ballots. And there are various assorted means by which the delegates try to exercise their constitutional, their bylaw authority to approve or disapprove of the vote totals. So I want to point out, as far as I knew at the time on Sunday morning, Eric Bauman had tweeted Saturday night that he was the victor. The Democratic Party tweet reported that Eric was the victor. Those tweets did not include any vote totals. No other official body came before the convention to report the vote totals. And that began the dysfunction, as far as I was concerned, in the processing of the election from that point on. I mean, I think that there was no transparency because what was reported by Chairman Burton on behalf of Kimberly Ellis on Sunday was that they made an arrangement, they being the Ellis campaign and the Bauman campaign, along with Chairperson Burton, for some kind of review. The Bauman campaign has used the term ballot review. The Ellis campaign, since that day, have used the term audit. That agreement was not publicized to the delegates. It was a secret agreement. The terms of any agreement for account was not publicized to the delegates. The terms and the scope of the review or the audit, as the case may be, was not publicized or disclosed. Delegates did not have an opportunity to be part of that discussion as to how to resolve the close election and the allegations of improprieties. So that is the process that I believe was contrary to the open meetings rule of the Democratic Party as required by the National Party. There are specific 5 exceptions to the open meeting rule. None of those 5 exceptions applied to the resolution of the election for a chair. They include matters such as legal matters, personnel matters, internal party strategy for campaigns, contract negotiations, those type of issues. But a issue such as how to resolve a chair election does not fit in any of the exceptions in terms of the open meeting requirements of the bylaws.
Right. So now, are any of the delegates talking informally amongst themselves about whether they want to act as a group of delegates to challenge the things that you're talking about?
You know, I've seen a lot of positive comments to both my articles in the votes.We.org as well as Facebook posts. As to any concerted action, I've been party to a number of delegates requesting an audit be conducted, an independent audit, because my guess is there's probably no other way to actually resolve allegations of problems with the election than a forensic audit. So that, I think, is what the consensus is for those people who want to get resolution and bring unity, is to actually look at every relevant piece of paper to the election, have it done by an independent body who has expertise in such matters, and have a report made to the delegates, to the executive committee, to the officers, and to the membership of the Democratic Party as to what actually happened in this election, who voted for what, because these are open ballot proceedings, and what the totals are.
Yeah, I mean, because it seems to me that Kimberly's objections overlap with the delegates' objections, but they both coincide. It seems to me that the answer would be an independent audit, and for some reason, I mean, I guess I can disclose that in my conversations with the people, they basically kept reiterating, because this is something that they've said publicly, is that there is a process. The California Democratic Party has a process whereby she needs to make specific challenges before they can act. Now, when I was speaking to you about this in the pre-interview, you told me that is not the case. Do you want to elaborate?
I'll be happy to. So I've reviewed the bylaws themselves, and there's a article on officers, and within that article, there are provisions for officer elections, the statewide officer elections. There's a separate article on meetings, which basically means the conventions of the party in California, like the one we just had, at which the chair election took place. Neither one of those articles has any provision regarding what to do in the event of challenges or any type of protest concerning elections. There is a separate review commission that the party has established, and I believe that Kimberly Ellis and maybe other candidates have filed some kind of challenge. But if you look at the bylaws and you look at that review commission's jurisdiction, it does not include the two articles that I mentioned. The articles on officers, which includes officer elections, and the article on conventions. They have some limited review power over credentials if those credential challenges are made prior to 42 days before the convention. Otherwise, the credentials committee under the bylaws has jurisdiction over credentials. But credentials is just part of the issue in this election. The election procedures, the double casting of proxies that has been reported to have taken place, which is a violation of the bylaws for any individual to cast 2 votes in the election. There are no specific provisions about resolving that type of election violation. So presumably, the highest body, which is the convention, or between conventions, the executive committee, those two bodies would have authority to create procedures regarding resolution of those types of disputes.
Well, I wanted to go into the preliminary report that Kimberly issued because here's what I reported on my show the other day. I had a little bit of advance notice because I had spoken with someone in her campaign and I knew what some of these allegations were. But she details them much more clearly here, and they basically fit into 6 kinds. The first one being verification of identity. And she talks about how as the DNC, and I know because I was a national delegate, we were required to present our credentials every day, or we couldn't get in. And that was because of the fact that we could, if we did it just in the beginning, we could end up giving our credential to somebody and nobody would ever know. So the delegates to the CDP convention were, it says here, were either elected directly or chosen, appointed by bodies and individuals who were chosen in public elections. Unlike county registrars who can cross-reference voters' signatures against the voter registration file, the CDP has only one opportunity when they sign in and when they receive their credential. The CDP has required identification in the past, but its practice has been inconsistent and volunteer dependent. Since CDP delegates all serve as some manner of elected representatives, not verifying the identity of each person issued a credential is a dereliction of our collective duty to the registered Democrats who the delegates represent. So what do you think? I'll just go through them one by one. What do you think of that objection, the verification of the credential every day?
Well, okay. Well, again, since I'm not part of the Ellis campaign and I did not sit in the room looking at the ballots or the documentation, all I can raise is my own speculation. You do need normally some way of verifying every individual's vote. It's an open vote. Basically, every individual had a credential. There should be a registration form because you have to be registered at the convention, not just have a credential. If you're casting a proxy, there's another form signed under penalty of perjury by the delegate authorizing the proxy that is filed at the convention or beforehand. There's the sign-out sheet that every individual signed when they received their ballot for the officer elections. So you have those documents plus the ballots themselves. And unless you see all of them, you really can't tell, what happened in the election and whether it was proper. So the rule that you have an ID, an actual picture ID at the national convention to go along with the physical credential that you display is a good idea. It happened not to be the rule at the California party convention that just occurred. So that's
Okay.
but it was part of the rules.
So the second one is verification of fiscal eligibility, in which she says voting eligibility is determined in part by full payment of convention fees, and 2, payment of dues or written requests for dues to be waived. The records of delegates sign-in do not consistently provide verification that payments and or waivers were received prior to issuing credentials. The rule was clearly stated in registration information posted and shared on the CDP website. Without verification of payment records and due to incomplete information, verification of fiscal eligibility is not possible from the materials provided to the Ellis team. So this is why she wanted more materials and she wasn't allowed to see them. And when we get to the end of these irregularities, I'm going to talk about what their response was. And you're also going to talk about Eric Bauman's response. But go on, what were you going to say about the fiscal eligibility?
Well, so the Ellis campaign is correct that the rules are very clear that dues must be paid by every individual who seeks to cast a valid vote. So they're seeking the documentation of those dues payments by all voters whose votes were cast is a totally reasonable request in order to verify each voter's eligibility. So that's another document in addition to the ones I've already mentioned that is required to do a proper evaluation as to whether all the votes that were counted were whether or not they were validly cast. You need to prove whether or not the dues were paid for each ballot.
Exactly. And if this rules committee and the committee of compliance, whatever it's called, the compliance review committee, is going to be such a stickler as they were when the parliamentarian was ruling all of your objections out of order or your motions, your points of order, whatever, then I think they ought to be a stickler for these rules. Third problem, signature discrepancies. There are hundreds of ballots that have signatures that don't match credential sign-in signatures or are missing signatures. Since delegates have specific windows to obtain their credentials, which had to be presented in order to obtain a ballot, when the signature on the sign-in doesn't match with the signature on the ballot, this raises doubts that the individual voters were actually present during the window for registration. So that sounds like a pretty significant irregularity.
Well, again, what they're alleging would be a violation. You have to, in order to cast a valid vote, the individual would have to be registered at the convention. They have to have a credential and or a proxy for a credential. They have to have proof of the paid dues, proof of the sign-out sheet that the person signed out a ballot for themselves. So those are all documents that should be produced by the Democratic Party to the campaign in order to verify that the votes that were cast and counted were proper votes.
Right. Now, the next one is duplicate voting. The most concerning issue is duplicate voting, where an individual voted as a proxy on more than one ballot. There were multiple documented instances of this. Now, I'm going to repeat that because this comes up in what we're going to be talking about later. There were multiple documented instances of this. And here is the one instance that everybody on the Bauman side seems to be thinking is the only instance, even though I just said there were multiple instances. Quote, "It is gravely troubling that one of the individuals who voted for Eric Bauman as a proxy for two different delegates is an employee of the same legal firm currently representing Eric Bauman and the California Democratic Party. It is this same firm that has made the decision to prevent the Ellis team from continuing its review of materials, this same firm that currently employs the individual who voted twice and obtained two ballots." Proxy eligibility. During the review of the voter registration of proxies, it was noted that several individuals who served as proxies were not listed in the PDI database as registered Democrats including in one instance a proxy for an ADEM delegate that was not registered to vote in the same assembly district as the original ADEM delegate. This is a violation of CDP eligibility rules. And one thing I probably can say from my conversation with Gary Shea, because I'm sure he would repeat this publicly, is that he said that they didn't have to be from the same district. And you said, and he gave me some examples of where they did a lot of reform in that area, because they used to be they could come from anywhere, but they limited now where they could come from. And you said that that is not true, that they absolutely have to be, if they're representing the ADEM, it's different from if they were representing an assembly member, right?
Right. In other words, the assembly district Democrats in each assembly district in the state, the 80 assembly districts, do get to vote for a certain batch of delegates representing those assembly districts. So when one of those individuals who's elected from an assembly district appoints a proxy, their proxy has to come from the exact same assembly district. It's also true for central committee delegates. Central committees elect delegates, and if one of those individuals wants to appoint a proxy, that proxy has to come from that same central committee, that same county committee. It's not true, however, in other words, as you pointed out, if someone is a assembly member or an unsuccessful democratically endorsed assembly member, like I was in 2014, that individual can both make appointments as well as appoint a proxy for their vote, irrespective of the district. And that apparently has occurred.
All right. It was also noted that there were more than a dozen missing proxy forms. Therefore, no one could verify proxy address, current voter registration, or residence eligibility for those individual proxies. Now, this seems to me why she wants an independent audit. Now, here's what's happened. Well, actually, first, let me finish, and hopefully I'll remember to get back to this point. 6, anecdotal indications of inaccuracy, illegitimate ballots. The Secretary of the Merced County DPCC was asked to add 2 people to the roster retroactively to make them eligible to be delegates or have proxies at the convention. This was also asked of Orange County for at least 2 delegates, and in LA County for each 2 delegates as well. That's not legal, right? According to the rules?
Well, again, this is all information, these allegations that are being raised, I have no information about because I'm not in the room where the counting is. That's part of my concern.
That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you if what she's saying is illegal. If this in fact did happen, can you retroactively make someone a delegate or have proxies?
Yeah, well, the general rule is probably no. I don't see anything in the rules that allow for some kind of retroactive. There are some rules about vacancies that are very highly technical, vacancies and delegates. So my guess is if there was some excuse that there was a vacancy as opposed to just somebody not being able to be there, and a vacancy is not just their absence. A vacancy is that they resigned, basically. They took some affirmative step. Then there are some special rules that are very complicated regarding filling those vacancies. Most of those require some new election at the ADEM level or the county committee level. So what you're talking about there, which is some retroactive county delegate selection, that would seem to be not permitted by the rules.
All right. One delegate reported that her proxy was misled by others and instructed to vote for Bauman for chair against her express wishes. Now, I've heard conflicting stories about that, because I was bound and determined to track down whether Kevin De Leon instructed his delegates. And what I got was that you can't instruct your delegates. You can, but they can vote how they want, but they generally won't vote how they want. If they're a PLEO delegate, because they are serving as delegates at the behest of that PLEO. So they feel, bound and obligated to vote the way their PLEO votes or the way their pleo tells them to vote, although they don't legally, or, obviously no one's holding a gun to their head. But I want to ask you a question. If a proxy was instructed to vote, because one person that I do know, a Bernie person, who she told me she wanted to vote for Ellis, but she said she was voting for Bauman because the person that she was a proxy. No, actually, she was appointed by Almer Suchi, who is a assemblyman. So she said that he instructed her, but I don't think that's true. But what about this thing about the proxy? If you're a proxy, yeah.
Let me draw the distinction. There are appointed delegates by elected Democrats or unsuccessful Democrats or Democratic endorsed candidates. So they're appointed delegates. Those appointed delegates, whoever appointed them, they still have, that individual has the right to vote as they choose. They're not agents for the individuals who appointed them. It's different for a proxy. A proxy is the agent of the individual who appointed them. So I was a delegate. I was instructed to vote a certain way, and therefore I had to carry that out. I did not have discretion.
Right.
So an individual who was who instructed their proxy to vote a certain way, and the proxy did not vote that certain way, that would be a problem. Although it's a problem between the proxy and the delegate. I mean, in that case, the proxy actually broke their obligation to the delegate. As to how that's enforceable, I really don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. They're saying that certain things were, coerced. That's the next item. Several delegates reported that Eric Bauman offered specific incentives to them, standing committee appointments, help with campaigns, etc., in exchange for their votes. So obviously something like that, you'd have to get that delegate to come forward. Now, this has been reported, I guess, to the Ellis campaign anecdotally. One wonders if they were that concerned about, getting that appointment, if they're going to be willing to admit this. I mean, what's your thinking on that?
I agree. I think it's a question of proof. There's a general rule in all of election law that you can't threaten somebody with some kind of punishment. You can't offer some benefit in order to influence their vote. So there's no question that is a potential election law violation. Again, evidence of such actions needs to be produced by the party making the accusation, and the remedy, quite frankly, may be something other than changing that person's vote or discounting the vote. It may be some sanction against the individual, discipline, because we do have party discipline that occasionally is meted out by the party. People are brought up on charges through the review commission, and some appropriate discipline is meted out.
All right, so here's the next thing. Delegates or their partners reported being threatened that the California Democratic Party and or the LA County Democratic Party would hinder their campaign efforts and political consulting businesses if they did not support Eric. And I definitely know of one delegate. She was a delegate for Bernie to the DNC, who basically, and I'm not saying her name because she didn't want to come forward with this, but we all know that he approached her at his own Christmas party and basically said if she didn't stop campaigning and vocally supporting Kimberly Ellis, he would make sure she lost her election to what she was running for. So I don't want to talk about that, but I want to go to the next thing. An employee of the state assembly contacted the Ellis campaign to share information about the Los Angeles County proxy team for Eric Bauman, which they claimed organized individuals to serve as proxy voters who did not meet all the CDP criteria required. They also expressed concern that he or she could be vulnerable to retaliation. Individuals reported a proxy room where Bauman supporters were gathering and creating proxy forms and recruiting individuals from the Sacramento area to serve as out-of-district proxies for pleos and their appointees. And finally, took this out of order. Although the Ellis campaign had been informed that only one observer from the campaign would be permitted in the credentialing area to observe the process, there were more than 20 observers from the Bauman campaign in the credentialing area at several points, not just observing, but also interacting with the registration volunteers. What do you think of that last one?
Well, it's strange that that's happened, only because there is one rule that I've seen about the election observers, and that there's supposed to be one observer from each campaign. Now, I presumably that's talking about when the ballots are actually being distributed and put into and then cast into the ballot box. The credentialing area, at the beginning of the convention, my guess is that there should have been, access if there was some concern over improper credentials being handed out. And why one campaign, any unequal treatment of a campaign is pretty much automatically unfair, because both campaigns are supposed to have an equal footing in all aspects of carrying out their efforts to elect their own candidates.
So now she's asking that they want additional time to verify their own data collection, to collect information regarding whether proof of payment is and is not apparent, in order to follow up the CDP staff to make sure requirement payments or waivers were received prior to issuance of ballots, and learn how the alphabet was segmented for registration in order to understand if irregularities were general or localized to certain volunteer stations. And the conclusion is those who have attended several conventions in the past are familiar with the process of credentialing and ballot distribution. It is widely known that the tasks of credentialing and ballot distribution are performed by volunteers, most of whom are doing these tasks for the first time. These volunteers receive minimal training and may only serve for one shift per the entire convention. There is a strong implication that party insiders with intimate knowledge of how the CDP operates were able to exploit the weaknesses inherent in a process staffed by the volunteers with minimal training. An independent audit of the registration and balloting in the CDP's chair's race provides an excellent opportunity for California Democrats to follow the trail of allegations right back to the actual public ballot. Now, what I've been told, I read a very long statement from Gary Shea that sounded like a lot of mumbo jumbo to me, but basically he reiterated that it's the same as what they have been saying. They're not providing any more time, any more information, unless she comes forward with specific allegations, with specific names. And I feel that, the reason that she's not doing it is because they're all Eric Bauman supporters, the Rules Committee, the Clients Committee, everybody that's supposedly doing a fair process are all supporters of him. So she's worried that the evidence could be tampered with. I mean, perhaps these missing proxy forms could suddenly turn up if she provided the names of who these people are. Perhaps the signatures could be altered. I mean, there's any number of things. She's not saying this. This is me speculating now, that could happen. So I suggested, and I suggested this to Hillary Crosby, who was the only trained auditor in the room, by the way. She liked the suggestion. I said, what if the evidence was all sequestered with an independent third party? And then she could come forward with these specific allegations. And I mentioned that to Gary Shea, and he thought that was an interesting idea. And now he's telling me that it's premature to even mention that idea to the people that he talks with until she, again, comes forward with specific allegations. So I don't know. I tried to find out before this show started whether she is, in fact, going to file this formal complaint that they want her to file. I know that she has talked about other venues, which I'm assuming means lawsuits. But, even Betty Yee, the state controller, has agreed that there should be an independent audit. And yet Eric Bauman is, selectively cites from Betty Yee's statement in his response. And his response was, I think, particularly nasty in the typical Eric Bauman way. Maybe you could read some of that response.
Okay, I'll leave it to your characterization about what it was or isn't, because it is what it is. So This is I'm reading something from the California Democratic Party website, which is cadem.org. And its headline is dated June 5th, 2017. And it's entitled Statement from California Democratic Party Chair Eric C. Bauman on the CDP election. And Lauren, just stop me if you feel I'm going on too long, because it's a very, very long statement.
Well, first of all, I want to just put up this question by Robin Gibson. She is an election protection person from Los Angeles. And she's asking, wouldn't the ADEMs have the right to see the documents?
Well, again, there are no rules about how the election should be investigated or reviewed, or how challenges or allegations of improprieties. I have not been able to find any particular rules. If somebody who's watching this video or they want to send it to me in Facebook, I just haven't been able to find any specific rules of how investigations or how elections of chairs or other officers of the state party are to be reviewed. So as to whether any component delegation to the convention, what their rights are to look at documents pertaining to their group, such as ADEMs, I couldn't tell you. It's just speculation. I can tell you the only way you're going to get the answer as to who won this election is to look at 100% of the official documents. I can go over what those are. They have to do with the dues payments. They have to do with the credentials. They have to do with the registration forms at the convention, the ballots themselves, the sign-out sheets, the proxy statements. I think those are all of them, but there may be one other category. So all the official documents that are required by delegates or the ballots themselves in order to be credentialed and approved, all those documents have to be reviewed by somebody, hopefully transparently, hopefully someone or some group who have professional expertise in this matter and who are independent and not beholden to either side of the election. So at that point, I'll read Eric's statement.
Okay.
I wholeheartedly agree with State Controller Betty Yee's comments over the weekend that rushing to the media in order to hash out the aftermath of the CDP chair's race has been hurtful to our party. Such actions have brought the conversation to a heightened level of acrimony, and the longer this continues, the further away we fall from fighting the real battles in front of us, like passing Medicare-style healthcare for all, remaining a leader on global climate change, and gearing up for the 2018 elections, which are just a year away. Again, I'm reading from Eric Bauman's statement. That is why I've done everything in my power to bring down the level of tension in the situation. My only public statement on the process was to ask all members of the Democratic Party to treat each other with respect and dignity, and to allow Kimberly Ellis and her supporters the opportunity they deserve to do a thorough review of the ballots. I myself stayed away from the CDP headquarters during that review to make certain that none of her activists were uncomfortable or felt like I was imposing on them. The only other statements that the California Democratic Party has issued on the matter were in response to direct attacks and accusations levied by blast communications from Kimberly Ellis. CDP's bylaws and procedures outline an open and transparent process, one administered and adjudicated by the staff and committee leaders chosen by former CDP Chairman John Burton. So while my administration continues to step through that process in a calm and welcoming manner, Ms. Ellis has chosen to ratchet up the rancor at every turn, propagating inaccurate innuendos and disingenuous half-truths designed to turn our members against each other.
Okay, that's what I mean. That's what I mean by nasty, okay? She has never, in whatever she has put forward, she has never said anything characterizing Eric Bauman in the way that he just characterized her. So go on. Just
hours after Controller Yee sagely called for an end to the destructive and divisive pattern that Kimberly Ellis initiated. By the way, I've looked at the statement, at least as it was transmitted to me via Facebook, I believe by Flores Hoffman in Orange County. it didn't seem that way at all. That somehow accusing Kimberly of some divisive pattern. It didn't say that. I don't know where he's quoting that from.
Yeah.
Anyway, he goes on. Ms. Ellis announced that she had secured time on MSNBC to discuss the race. Then, when her time slot was lost due to coverage of the tragedies in London, she sent out another blast containing the wave of misinformation and manipulation she was obviously planning to spread on national television.
Wave of misinformation and manipulation. Okay. Typical Eric Bauman. Go on.
All right, continue with Eric Bauman's printed statement at the California Democratic Party website. I appreciate much of what Controller Yee said in her message about the urgency of unity, our party's need to uphold our values, and the danger of the furious pace at which the Trump administration is moving to reverse all of the progress we hold dear. But I do not agree, so he's admitting, I do not agree with her insinuation that my actions have been equal and in line with the tone and tenor for the other side. I also reject the notion that it is necessary to take the ballot review and election challenge process away from the system that is in accordance with CDP bylaws and procedures and was set up under former Chairman John Burton. It is disingenuous for Ms. Ellis to praise the administration and legacy of John Burton in one breath and the next to cast negative aspersions about the staff, elections process, committee leaders, and volunteers he put in place to run and oversee the election. I want to stop there because he keeps on referring to some specific process. If there is a process that John Burton created, nobody seems to know about it because it's not on the website. It's not part of the bylaws. It's not part of other rules that the Rules Committee has published on the website. If it's there somewhere in public, as the bylaws requires that rules of the party be distributed to all the delegates for the convention, he's making something up or he's got something sacred. That's all I can conclude because nobody has pointed out all these detailed rules about how the review of an election, when there are challenges and allegations of improprieties, there's just nothing there.
You know, and what's interesting, hold on, let me just stop you, because what's interesting is I'm thinking about how they stonewalled me in terms of not giving me the answers that I requested. I wonder if they would stonewall the mainstream media. Now, you'll notice that the LA Times, which was bought by the Tribune Company, which ran it into the ground, and it was recently bought by Sinclair Media. A lot of people don't know this happened. If I knew it was in the offing, I would have done another protest at Bruce Karsh's house, like I did that stopped him from selling the LA Times to the Koch brothers. But now they're saying Sinclair Media is even worse than Fox News, and it was pretty much Trump TV. So their reporters right now are pretty much stenographers. All they do is report whatever the establishment, tells them. And I personally tried to get the two reporters that were covering the state convention to cover the instances of bullying and intimidations and threats made by Eric Bauman, not only to me, not only to Yolanda Gonzalez, not only to other people who are too afraid to come forward, but might if they were contacted by the press. And I was expressly told that they were only interested in physical, like if he had laid hands on this person and jabbing someone in the chest like he did to Yolanda was not physical enough for them. I wonder if the person who he got into the chokehold at the Santa Clara county party meeting would qualify. I know that person is very shaken up. I don't know if that person would go public, but I feel like the most that we could see is this article, this headline by the Sacramento Bee, in which it said, was Bernie Kratz's choice to lead California Democrats cheated out of the chairmanship? I mean, that's, sort of editorializing, but the rest of the article is just basically he said, she said, without any attempt to try to find out, do any investigative reporting on their own as to whether these rules or bylaws do or do not exist. And, the other thing that I really resent is they keep calling Kimberly Bernie Kratz's choice. As I've mentioned several times when discussing this matter, the Bernie-crats only took over about the majority of 1/3 of the delegates. So that is like they have 1/9. The elected delegates only make up 1/3 of all the delegates. So they have 1/9 of the delegates, the Bernie-crats, and yet she got 49% of the vote, even by their own count. So clearly she had to have a lot of Hillary supporters. So in truth, Kimberly Ellis is the unity candidate here. And if Eric Bauman was really concerned about unity, he would step aside and allow her to assume her rightful place, as I truly believe that she was cheated out of this chairmanship. And that's my editorial comment. You can feel free to go on.
Well, if you're giving me a chance to say, you said a lot of things, and you certainly, certainly free and encouraged to express your opinions. I have a couple of points. One is, the reporters involved. I used to represent East Coast reporters. I was in-house counsel at the Newspaper Guild of New York back in the 80s. They're largely very straightforward people, want to do a good job. If their bosses let them, if their circumstances allow them to. But they're often, restricted by what the editorial policy of the paper happens to be. Some newspapers and other mass media restrict the reporters, others don't. At this point, whether Sinclair or some other company is operating the LA Times, even in past administrations, the original founders, they had very strong conservative points of view at the LA Times themselves. And it's just a problem with the mass media that, their businesses and their businesses owned by individuals have very strong opinions, and they're often not the same opinions as many of their readers have.
Right.
So you said a couple other things. I mean, I can't really speculate on the motives of what's going on. I can just look at the facts, and the facts tell me that there doesn't seem to be an interest by any of the parties involved on the administrative side, that is staff and the leadership and possibly the past leadership, to have the kind of complete transparency that is necessary when you have a close election. We saw this in the past with the primaries when it happened to be Bernie versus Hillary, and there was intense frustration growing among the young new Democrats that were flowing into the party. Many of them actually started during the Obama years and then flowed to Bernie's campaign. And that's my biggest concern, is that we keep on running things in the Democratic Party and it keeps discouraging people because people, the young ones, have a perception that things are supposed to be fair. And they're not used to the kind of old-style backroom politics that I grew up in Chicago when Mayor Daley was running the Democratic Party of Chicago. And there are some residual aspects that you see when close elections are not resolved in a completely transparent fashion. And that's my problem with this election.
Well, yes. And then when you do have questions of election fraud or vote rigging or whatever, then all of a sudden you start distracting people with diversions. And there's been plenty of dog whistle diversions in this campaign. And I want to show this one comment here, because I don't know if this guy is being facetious or not, but this is exactly what I want to speak about next. For those of you who did not see my video of Eric Bauman bullying me, at the end I said more people should speak out. This is like the Bill Cosby situation, where when one person came forward, another person would come forward after that. It took people to come out. I was not comparing Eric Bauman to Bill Cosby. Now, this is exactly what happened earlier in this race, just prior to the end. All of a sudden, there were these allegations that delegates were being contacted and being, told these rumors that Eric Bauman had done inappropriate things with young boys or men. I didn't hear any of these rumors. None of the delegates I knew heard these rumors. The only person who seemed to hear these rumors were Eric Bauman, and then he spread it further by going to the press, and then everybody was alleging homophobia on the part of Kimberly Ellis's campaign. Similarly, something has just happened with these challenges in that this one instance, remember I said I was going to be getting back to this one instance of somebody voting twice? This person by the name of Sean Kiernan, I think, who works for the Kaufman Legal Group, who represents both Eric Bauman and the California Democratic Party. And when I mentioned that to Gary Shea, he thought he was representing him in his context as a party chair, but he has been his personal lawyer for many years. And therefore, I think it clearly is a conflict of interest that they share the same law firm. And when I mentioned that, he said that is for the California bar to decide. So what I was going to say was this person, Sean, who works for the Kaufman Legal Group, apparently voted as a proxy for an ADEM, and then he signed the ballot of a fellow by the name of Morris Friedman, known as Fritz, who is an Orthodox Jew who said that he could not write, that you cannot write on the Sabbath. So all of this chatter ensued on a particular person's Facebook page, who I will not mention, about this person and whether it was legal or not legal, or I should say kosher or not kosher for a person to vote. I mean, somebody looked up, Googled it and said they're not supposed to be voting, but then other people started saying, this is very subjective, the way this is interpreted, but clearly writing is considered working and you can't work on the Sabbath. I don't know. I was raised as a Reform Jew. I don't know about any of these rules, but I will say that the thing quickly devolved to allegations now on the part of anti-Semitism on Kimberly's campaign. And this is the kind of dog whistle politics that we do not need. And I feel that rather than do the transparent and the accountable thing, which is this independent audit that Kimberly is calling for, and that you think that the delegates deserve, and that Betty Yee, who is the controller of the whole state this controller of the state of California, has called for, he is creating these diversions. And this particular person whose Facebook page this was, who I am not naming because it's not really about her, was all of a sudden posting hashtags like Team Democrat and we have to start, unify against Donald Trump. And this is exactly what the establishment is doing. This is exactly what the Hillary wing of the California Democratic Party has been doing since the election, which is, as you say, not counting the feelings of the young Bernie supporters. And they're not all young. I have to tell you, there were a lot of middle-aged people that got involved with the California Democratic Party for the first time because they were involved in the Bernie campaign. So it's not just young people who are being turned off. There's a lot of middle-aged people and senior citizens who have exited because of the shenanigans in the Democratic Party. So one of the signs that we saw, that they were making the last day was 3 strikes. The first strike being Bernie, the second strike being Keith Ellison, and the third strike being Kimberly Ellis. People really feel that they were cheated, and I just cannot see any reason why he and his team are hiding behind procedures and asking, for these allegations. It's like a cat and mouse game or the chicken and the egg situation. Like, we're not going to do anything until we get the specific allegations. Why are they hiding behind these rules, which you say don't even exist, and not, if they really wanted to unify the party and move forward to fighting Trump, which, again, my viewers know that I think we need another agenda. It's not just a matter of resisting what we don't want. We have to have a positive program. And that's something that Kimberly talked about a lot, single payer healthcare, banning fracking, et cetera, then I simply do not see why they are pushing back against this idea of an independent audit. What do you think?
I really do believe very strongly, and I think Betty nailed it when she said that, the path to unity is an independent forensic audit. I don't know if she used the word forensic, but the other language that she used indicated that it would be a detailed audit of all the relevant documents to show exactly what the vote totals and who won. So I think it's that simple. It should be done independently. Absent that, I don't think the party is going to be unified, and that's a scary thing given how important California is to the National Democratic Party and its efforts to regain the Congress and regain the Senate in 2018. Especially, I live in Orange County. We have 4 key seats that are held by incumbent Republicans. It was hoped at the beginning of the campaign, which started when the vote totals were released for the last election, that we hoped that we could do something about these 4 seats. But with the divisions that exist, it's going to be very tough. And in order to overcome those divisions, you have to have a completely transparent resolution of the chair election. To tell everybody, oh, just forget it, go back, don't worry, nothing to see here. People are too bright in the Democratic Party. There's a lot of smart people who are very unhappy about what's going on, and they, like I, are as much opposed to Trump as any more conservative, more established member of the Democratic Party. To accuse us of people that want democracy and transparency of somehow facilitating Trump's continuing domination of our politics and his support by the Republicans is ridiculous. We want to fight him. We want to fight him with both hands and not any hands tied behind our back. And that means full transparency and democracy in the party.
Great. And on that positive note, I'm going to end the show because we've been going for an hour. But I want to thank you, Joel, for being on the show and adding your expertise that only a lawyer could provide.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I am a retired attorney. I want to make that clear, and I'm not an active member of the bar. But thank you very much, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And good night, everybody.